Hello everyone. Today we are going to take a look at another model game in the Grünfeld Defense. The game was played between Pavel Eljanov and Jan Nepomniachtchi in 2015. So rook c1 and this little bit weird looking move bishop e6, but actually it's one of the best response against the bishop f4 rook c1 variation. So here our recommendation in the course is to play with e3. If white plays knight g5, then c5 is a pretty strong move for black, and it can lead to massive complications. So instead e3, and here Jan played c5, which I believe is a little bit dubious move, theoretically speaking. So the main line with really lots of games goes like dc4, knight g5, bishop d5. So it looks like that with e4, white is getting the upper hand because the bishop has to go away, and then bishop c4, but black has this important h6, and the line goes on and on, so it's a different story. So Jan opted for c5 in this game, d takes on c5, knight c6, Eljanov went knight g5, so still hitting that awkwardly placed bishop on e6, but then queen a5. So black doesn't care about some pawn weaknesses, he just wants very active pieces. He has some advantage in the development, obviously. Our king is pinned, some knight e4 ideas, as typical in the Grünfeld can happen. So knight takes e6, fe, bishop e2. So here once again black has different possibilities, like rook a to d8, for example, is one move, or e5, but black played knight e4, which actually looks like the most principled continuation, immediately attacking this focal point on c3, so black pieces are looking at this knight. So white castles, and now bishop c3. I believe this is a precise move from black, because if you start the other way around, like knight c3, bc3, then for example if you want to take with the bishop now, then it's not a tempo. So generally when you have this option to take first with one minor piece, or one heavy piece, or whatever, that normally it's better to have the second one with the tempo, because then it requires some reaction from your opponent. Here queen is not under attack, so after cd white is just winning the game probably. So bishop c3, and normally that's why what I said, that it's better to start with this, because if bc3, then knight takes on c3, and it's a tempo on our queen. Queen has to move, and then black can get rid of the pair of bishop, and the position is completely unclear. Black has many different moves, even he can try to play d4. Of course, it doesn't look that great, since if you could take, then the weaknesses on the e file are quite visible for our queen, but ed4 fails to rook takes on f4, so black is going to follow it up with e5 with an interesting position. But of course, if you want to play for an advantage, there is another move for white, and that's a very strong move, that even here we can play c takes d5. So at this moment we are down a piece, but both the knight on c6 and the bishop on c3 are hanging, so it's not like we are sacrificing a piece. Actually, in some lines we do, but okay, in the game rook a d8 was played, which is probably the best move. There is this bishop b2, which looks like extremely tempting and logical, so to move away that hanging bishop with the tempo, but here white has a very strong move, dc6. So now material is equal. Black is taking a rook on c1, and what is extremely remarkable for me, that once again we are down a rook, but we have many different ways actually to gain an advantage here, which is pretty nice. And queen takes c1 is not even among the top 5 moves, I would say. So for example, one very nice move here is queen d4. So basically saying that everything is hanging in black's possession, and it's kind of true. So this bishop is hanging, the knight is under attack, we have c takes b7 threat. And the point is obviously that we want to take now the knight with the idea of playing even queen takes on e6. So yeah, this is already a very, very bad position for black. So rook a d8 is correct. And then a very strong move from Eljanov. So even here, not taking on c3, simply because of this knight c3, what I showed earlier, this idea of getting rid of the pair of bishops, but he played queen c2. So still, now not only 2, but 3 minor pieces are hanging. So and it's a pretty nice concept, which makes this line pretty tough for black. So e takes d5, I mean, really there is not much better. So if black allows queen takes e4, then his position is just collapsing. So e d5, bc. And yeah, basically here black has 2 main moves. Of course, he's down a pawn, so taking on c5 is the logical one. And the game knight c5 was played. Queen c5 also looks normal, but our reaction is also very, very typical. So it's pair of bishops against pair of knights. Opening up the game and destabilizing the knights should be our goal, and for that it's perfect to play c4. So immediately challenging this pawn, which has to protect the knight on e4, and black's position is actually super difficult here. So, okay, what is the most natural move here for black is to play e6 to stabilize that pawn. But here I was absolutely amazed by how bad black's position is. That's pretty remarkable, and I believe that's why it's a good example to show, because of the power of the bishops in such pretty open position. So c takes d. That's very logical. Now black cannot take back, only with the queen, but that's not, of course, that's absolutely awful because of this pin here. So queen takes on c2, rook c2, and then e d5. And okay, if you look at this position, like okay, 5 pawns for each side, material is pretty limited. It shouldn't be that bad for black. Maybe like that could be a. Of course, he's worse. I mean, there is no question about it. He has one more pawn island, for example, bishop pair we have. But this position is around +5 for white, which I was a little bit surprised, to be honest, to discover that. So basically, like, to translate it, that it's like white has an extra rook, so +5 is an incredibly huge advantage. So like completely winning. So I looked at a few lines here just to see why it is like that, because if it would be like +2, I wouldn't be shocked at all, but +5 was a lot. So f3, I mean, once again, we want the knights to be passive, and if the knights are not very good in defense. So, okay, here knight f6 or knight d6 are 2 possibilities. Let's start with knight f6. Maybe looks a little bit more natural, but once again, the problem is that this knight only has, you know, this defending function and no real active squares inside, so that's not good. So we just play rook d1, and yeah, again, it's just, the thing is that you know, normally when the position is +5, it's not only like not just rook d1, but something more concrete. But here the more concrete thing is that basically black cannot really move, which is like there is an issue with every move. Like you can try yourself. I tried 3 different moves in this position, which looked like normal to me, but I lost very quickly in all the time against the computer. So, for example, you know what happens if I try to get rid of my isolated pawn? I mean that's really bad because white has this nice move bishop h6. So rook f7, and then there is bishop c4. So pinning this rook, and if knight d5. So the thing is that here on e4, black can still play knight to c3, attacking the rook. I mean, it's still probably not enough, but at least some play. But we can include even bishop g5. So the idea is that the d8 rook has to protect the d5 knight, and wherever it goes, on d7 it looks protected, but I mean, I say protected for the lines of knight c3, but we can just simply take it and then win all the pieces from our opponent. So it's not good. Now I am looking at rook f e8, to be honest, as an option, but here I believe we again give this bishop c4 check, or maybe even bishop g5. It's hard to exactly say which is the best one. e4 also possible, of course. Now I am using the help of, it didn't know this feature in chess.com, that once you make a move and it's like very green, that's normally the best one according to the engine. So here e4, with the idea of playing something like bishop c4, bishop b5, and yeah, this pawn is going to be lost. And also just to show you a funny idea, that white often has moves like bishop a6 as well. So that's kind of the most drastic way to destabilize a knight. And of course, if black takes, then rook c6 and pawns are falling. So okay, so that was d4. It's really not working, and the pawn is just going to be weaker at that case. So I looked at rook f e8. I mean, it also looks very natural to bring the rook to the e5, but again, this just gives every move kind of gives new targets for white. So here bishop b5 is strong, attacking on c6, and once black plays rook e6, then there is a very nice move, which was also typical in some other lines, is bishop a4. So it basically opens the b file, so we can attack on b7 anytime with the rook, and it will be not so comfortable to protect. And also the bishop can be used in this diagonal. g4, g5 is coming to further weaken the d5 pawn, so yeah, also very bad. And finally, okay, bringing the king in the endgame also normally an option, but actually here white can already start a very direct play because the king is taking away now the f7 square from the rook. So rook b1, rook d7, rook b2, knight to a5. Pawn cannot really move because we just pin the knight, and then we can double with the rooks and win material. So knight a5, but then we play bishop b5. Rook cannot move. That's important, because if rook moves here, then we play bishop d6. And if rook goes there, then we play bishop c7 with double attack. So knight has to go back, and again this little nice move, bishop a4. Pawn on b7 is lost, so bishops are completely destroying black's position here. So that's what happens after knight f6. Knight d6 is a little bit more active, so at least the knight has some potential. In practical play, I guess this should be rather black's choice to look for knight f5, knight c4 maybe. But again, white goes rook d2, attacking d5. And here d4 is the question. So this is also an idea of knight d6, that now the rook is attacking this bishop. And yeah, this extremely remarkable sequence is coming here. So here, of course, white has to keep the bishops. He plays rook b1. So now the idea is very simple. We just want to take d6, rook takes back, and then b7 is hanging. So for example, if rook d7, then it's just a pawn, and d4 probably falling as well. If black goes b6, then we manage this thing. The knights desperately need protection and outposts, and now c6 is not protected. So after rook c1, the knight has to go, and then d4 is falling for free by taking with the rook. So best move is d takes e3. So here we shouldn't fall for a black trick that d6 is not for free because rook f4 and the knight protects on d8. So we gave up all our advantage, but bishop e3. So it's getting really interesting, I would say. That the material is even more limited, and black managed to get rid of his weak pawn on d5, which is certainly a big achievement. On the other hand, it's also true that the position gets more open, and basically white's advantage is just transformed a little bit, but it remains huge. So it's still like this +5, +6, which was incredible. But simply, this strength of the bishops with the kind of highlighted issues of the knights. So like knights are really struggling here. I mean, d6, for example, is an awful square for the knight. It cannot be stabilized. Combined with the weakness of this king. So the weakness of the king is also important. The position is just losing. So I looked at knight f5, bishop g5. So going from a tempo, going away with the tempo. And okay, if rook d2, if we simply take back on d2 with the bishop, then is this plus 1.5, which means that, it's basically with perfect play, it's winning, but black has definitely chances to defend, but we have very strong intermediate move, bishop c4 here, which kind of just crushing. So what's the point? The point is that if the king comes to the sevens, then we, before taking back the rook, we take an extra pawn, and the game is over. And if the king goes to h8, then bishop takes d2. So b7 is hanging, b6, bishop c3 check. So now it doesn't really make much sense to cover with the knight, because after bishop d5, this is every possible way that knight will be lost. And again, let's highlight the king's position. So that's a big problem, that black cannot just get out from this, let's say on h6 or something. He's not in time. So knight g7, and then rook d1. Also with the simple idea of rook d7. Black blocks this with rook d8, and now just to illustrate the power of the bishops, is like a really beautiful position. Rook d8, knight d8, and you can stop here the video to find the next move for white. It's not that difficult, but very instructive. So it's bishop d5. So this is the typical thing, taking away all the squares from the knight, so it cannot move. The other one is pinned. And if black would like to try to get some time to unpin himself, then this bishop f6 is already picking up the knight on d8. So this is a really amazing line, which is kind of important to see for the understanding that white is like completely winning for white. It's not even a little bit better or clearly better, but winning. Okay, so that's what could happen in case of queen c5. So it allows c4 right away. That's a big problem with the move. So Jan played knight takes c5. Now rook fd1 was played. So the point here is that the c4 is not that good, because black can play d4. So that's a problem. I mean, previously when the knight was on e4, of course, it was not possible, but now d4 is kind of unpleasant with e5, d3, such ideas. It's just complicated. So rook d1, controlling the d4 square, bringing the rook to the play. But again, I believe because of the pair of bishops, because of the black's open king, this is pretty comfortable for white here. But next move of Nepomniachtchi is actually a serious mistake, in my opinion. So when you have the pair of knights, then I believe you really should avoid endgame at all costs, almost like against the pair of bishops. So if in such position we can just trade the queens, I mean, it's like, say, 99% of the cases is good for the bishops, because as I showed in previous lines, it's really much easier to highlight the power of the bishops when there are no queens. You know, there are no these tactical tricks with queen and knight and no counterplay the board. So besides queen a4 is even a tactical mistake, which actually very common if the move is strategically speaking incorrect. It's very often also a tactical mistake, and yeah, it's simply not a good move. So he should have played something like e6, maybe trying to stabilize and keep the tension. So c4, black still has d4. But for example, white can play h4, h5, so the knights are kind of missing from the king side. Or play e5, but then problem with e5 that it's again a little bit makes more targets in black's position. And now white has many moves. I mean, I would just probably play h3 first, open the back rank, and then, you know, see what can I do with my bishops, like bishop g4, maybe with this one to go to g3, so to attack the pawns, something on e6 maybe. And in a good moment, c4 is always in the air. So of course still an unpleasant position, but queen a4 is really, once again, it shouldn't be done, the queen trade, and also tactically it's failing quite badly here. So queen takes, of course, Eljanov takes, knight a4, and now he played an extremely strong move. Maybe again you can stop the video and try to find it. So he played bishop g4. It's a very nice idea. He wants to simply give a check on e6 and then capture the pawn on d5. So let's see, black has basically three ways to cover e6 square. Let's see one by one. So if knight c5, the knight is coming back. It's not helping because bishop c7. And, you know, the rook has, the rook has no squares on the d file, and d5 pawn is falling. If the king goes to f7, protecting e6 also, this is a pretty easy line. Bishop c7, rook goes, then rook d5. Here black can try this knight b2, but the line is pretty forcing. Bishop d8, knight d1. Both sides are saving the minor pieces, but at the end, knight takes c3, bishop d7. And the bishops are amazing, and this knight is in huge trouble. So Jan played in the best move to cover e6 square, but what computer is saying here is a pretty remarkable idea, and shows that, you know, it's no matter how bad your position is, there are some resources. Of course, it's ridiculously difficult to find this idea for black, but I believe it would have given the best practical chances. And this is the move h5, which why I'm saying is ridiculous, because white wants to play bishop e6 and black is forcing even this. So it looks extremely counterintuitive, but it has some deep tactical points, as we will see. So bishop e6, king g7. So first of all, bishop takes on d5 is not working, because knight b2 is an immediate draw. So the rook has to move, it only can go to d2 and then knight c4. So we cannot take this knight, and rook goes to d3 or d1. It doesn't matter because the knight goes back to b2, and it's just a repetition and a draw. So other move is rook takes d5. Of course, it looks better, but then black plays king f6. And again, white has some issues with the coordination. So rook takes d8 is a must, but black is coming to rook d8, bishop b3, knight c5. Black is down a pawn, but suddenly there is no d pawn, so this rook can come down to d2. He can get rid of the pair of bishops, and suddenly the knights have some targets when they are much stronger than just defending. So, for example, it's pretty nice that if we play rook d1, which looks normal to avoid any counterplay from black, but rook d1, bishop d1, and g5. And suddenly our bishop is trapped, which is pretty remarkable. So it goes to c7, then knight e6. Knights are covering all the squares, it comes back h4, and we lose the game. So rook d5 also not good. Good move is bishop c7. And here black plays knight c5. At least according to the engine, this is the best move. To be honest, here I kind of disagree because white plays bishop h3 here. So the point is that if bishop takes on d8, then knight e6 is another way to lose our bishop. It is just trapped. So bishop h3, and then rook d8, rook d5, b6. Something like this computer is saying is the best chance for black. I mean, to be honest, I'm not that convinced here. It looks to me that we have we have an extra pawn, and we can most probably just, slowly regroup our pieces, probably play g3 at some moment, bring the bishop back, or just double on the d5. So I'm not so convinced. On the other hand, I really like this move here, king f6. So the point is that bishop takes d8, then we take this bishop on e6. Now the bishop can go away, but so black lost a full exchange instead of a pawn, but on the light squares, he has quite a nice blockade, and like technically speaking, I would say it's a better chance to hold such position with black than just being down a pawn against strong bishops. So b5, for example, bishop g3, knight a5. So finally the knights are really good, blockading the position. Of course, it's very far from a draw or anything like that. White has to play something like e4. But again, after d, rook e1, knight c5, f3, objectively the position should be winning, but black will play something like knight c4, a6, and just stays solid. It requires quite good technique, in my opinion, to win this position. But yeah, once again, there are a few incredibly difficult moves along the way to find, but this h5 was the best. So Jan played rook f6, and the point of bishop g4. Now you can see bishop f3, and black is simply losing a pawn. So if e6, that was the point to force the rook to f6, and this move is just forking the rooks, so it's not possible. And if knight b6, then simply bishop c7, taking the knight and taking the d5 pawn is decisive. So yeah, there is no way, simply quite amazing. And if rook f5, then just g4, kicking the rook away and then taking on d5. So black just lost a pawn. It's pretty surprising, but again, it's thanks to that queen a4 mistake. And yeah, the rest is pretty simple. So black played king g7, and yeah, Eljanov kept the positional advantages with an extra pawn now. So rook b1, e5, new weakness on e5, now rook b5, again, pretty nice, highlighting this pawn. Rook e8, h4, just expanding. And yeah, basically he did not even need the king. I mean, he was just collecting material. Rook a5, he played knight b4, c5, knight c4, b5, and the c pawn is extremely strong. So knight d6. This was the second pawn, g5, and after rook c5, black resigned. Simply, he cannot move with the knights. He has to protect on e5, and maybe really now the winning idea is just to bring the king, just attack this knight and win like that is one way to win this game. So yeah, it's pretty nice game from Eljanov, I believe, and also what was not played also very interesting, that what could have happened if black defends better or a little bit differently. So the games, like this tense part is pretty short in a way, but analyzing these different options for black, I believe, can help us to understand why bishops are really strong in such positions against the pair of knights. All right, so thank you for watching, and hope to see you soon with a new video.